They told me to step aside at my sister's wedding, said it wasn't my day. I'd financed the venue and signed every vendor contract. I didn't raise my voice. I opened my binder, pointed at the clauses, and everything stopped. Before watching the video, please tell us in the comments from where you are watching this video. Lauren trusted my spreadsheets more than her Pinterest boards, and that meant something. We toured Highfield Barn first because the parking was flat for Mom's walker. Olivia, the venue manager, led us past string lights and a clean, wide ramp. Accessibility is non-negotiable, I said, and Lauren nodded right away. Tyler said his family would love the rustic beams and the open lawn. I asked about noise cutoff, liability insurance, and vendor access windows. Olivia answered fast, like she liked organized people who came prepared. 10 p.m. for amplified music. Earlier if there's a noise complaint, she said. We require proof of insurance and list the contracting party as responsible. I stored that phrase away, because words like responsible end arguments later. We sat at a small table near the office window, facing the neat white posts. Let's make this simple, I told Lauren, keeping my voice low and steady. I'll be the contracting party for venue and vendors. You choose the look. She sighed with relief and said, Please, Dan, I hate haggling. Tyler shrugged and asked about sound checks and bar rules, not the paperwork. Olivia slid the contract across and tapped the key lines with her pen. I read aloud so no one could claim confusion later. Point of contact authority. The contracting client directs staff day of. Lauren said, That's you, and I nodded. Guest conduct, slurs, threats, or harassment trigger a halt until corrected, I added. Tyler said, Seems fair, and I kept reading. I added writers we could actually use, not dramatic fluff meant for stories. I asked for ADA seating on both sides and space reserved for Mom. I added a non-disparagement clause on site with a warning system and pause rights. Olivia said, Reasonable. We've used it during drunk outbursts near the bar. I negotiated a photo license granting usage to the contracting client only. That keeps control if images get twisted, I explained in plain English. Tyler looked confused until I said, It means we decide what gets posted. Lauren squeezed my arm and said, I just want simple and kind. I initialed each rider so the margins meant something. We left with a draft that felt like a seatbelt, not a trap. We toured 2 more places because I wanted comparison points we could use. One smelled like mold, and the coordinator dodged questions about permits and neighbors. The third looked pretty, but the exit paths were narrow and dark. Someone will trip here, I said, and Lauren agreed instantly. We circled back to Highfield Barn because it was competent, not flashy. Olivia emailed the revised contract that night, already redlined to match our notes. I checked names, dates, insurance limits, and the indemnity paragraph without dragging it out. The fees were clear, deposit due on Friday, balance due a week before. This is the adult room, Lauren said half laughing. I told her we'd sleep easy once the deposit cleared and copies printed. At lunch, Tyler's mom called and asked to take over the adult decisions. I put the call on speaker so Lauren could choose her words herself. Cheryl said, We have a country club we prefer, and real photographers. Lauren's jaw tightened, and she looked at me for solid ground. I kept my voice even and said, We reserved Friday, payment pending, terms agreed. Cheryl snapped, It's not your day, Daniel, like I'd crashed a parade. Lauren finally said, He's handling contracts, Mom. I want this venue. Cheryl hung up without a goodbye, and Tyler stared at his fries. She means well, he muttered, but even he didn't sound convinced. I wrote the time and summary in my notebook, because paper remembers. Friday morning, I met Olivia with a cashier's check and proof of insurance. We did a short walk-through and marked where the arch and chairs would stand. I initialed the riders and matched them to the signature page line by line. Fiduciary duty, I said, then added, Trusted manager, in plain terms. Lauren smiled and said, We're really doing this, and it feels calm. Olivia stamped copies and handed us a binder that closed with a snap. Keep this on site the day of, she said, tapping the spine twice. If someone challenges terms, this is the lighthouse. Tyler ran a hand through his hair and said, Let's hope we never need it. I looked at the binder and thought, hope is good, but paper is better. Tyler's family started with small changes that looked harmless if you blinked. A florist number dropped into the group chat with, We'll handle bouquets, under it. Lauren typed, We already booked, and added a soft smile to keep things calm. Cheryl replied, We know a better rate, and dropped a winking emoji. I forwarded our signed florist contract to Lauren and let silence do the work. Ryan, the best man, asked if the rehearsal dinner could move downtown. I said the barn ramp helped Mom and kept travel simple. He texted, "Understood," and added a thumbs up that felt noncommittal. Tyler said his mom loved a particular steakhouse near the freeway. I said the caterer had our count and timing, and we were locked. The next week, place cards arrived from Cheryl's cousin with my name missing. Lauren called her on speaker and kept her voice steady and clear. "Daniel sits at family," she said, and repeated it after the pause. Cheryl sighed like she was dealing with staff and said, "Helpers sit near the back." I answered, "I'm not staff. I'm the contracting client under every vendor." Agreement. Tyler muttered, "Let's keep the peace." Like peace was a coupon he could hand out. Mom listened from the couch and squeezed my hand once. I wrote the incident in my notebook, date and time. Nothing dramatic. Paper is patient and it doesn't argue back. Ryan texted, "I'll nudge them," and then the thread went quiet. More cuts arrived dressed as favors and advice. Cheryl made a new thread without me titled Bridal Decisions. Ryan messaged privately, "They think you're busy anyway." I replied, "I'm available. Per contract, vendors follow me or Lauren." Miguel wrote back, "Copy that. I'll ignore side directions," which steadied things. Tyler suggested his aunt handle the playlist and add an open mic. "Speeches are capped and pre-approved," I said, pointing to the timeline and noise cutoff. He said his aunt would only add a few lines about family history. "Great," I said. "Send the lines and I'll time them." He didn't send anything that night, which told me all I needed. By Thursday, Cheryl announced she had real photographers standing by. I called Miguel and asked if he had concerns about interference. "If another shooter directs people, I pause until authority is clear," he said. I thanked him and emailed a short memo, access points, shot order, and rights. Tyler called and asked, "Do we really need memos for family?" "We need predictability, not drama," I said. "Guardrails keep this smooth and kind." He sighed and promised to talk to his mom again. I printed 2 copies of the memo and slid them into the binder. If they pushed, I wanted the push to hit paper first. Sunday morning, Cheryl posted a color scheme that killed Lauren's favorite coral. "It clashes with the family dresses," she wrote, like a rule had been violated. Lauren looked at me, torn between her taste and the noise. "You pick the dress," I said. "I'll handle the logistics." She typed, "Keeping coral," and earned 3 sad face reactions and a wow. I emailed the florist our final palette and copied Lauren, not Cheryl. The florist replied, "Confirmed with Daniel as contracting client," which closed that door. Tyler texted, "They're sensitive," and I typed, "We're following signed commitments." He sent back a lone K, which meant the argument moved to another room. At the tux fitting, Cheryl called me the checkbook in front of the clerk. "He's just paying. We'll make choices," she said, light as whipped cream. I met the clerk's eyes and said, "I'm the authorized point of contact." He nodded and wrote my name on the order. Tyler rubbed his temple and asked me not to escalate. "Stating facts isn't escalation," I said, keeping my voice level. On the drive home, Mom asked if we should back out to avoid trouble. "Lauren wants this," I said, "and the terms protect kindness." She patted my arm and said, "Then stay steady." Midweek, the ADA seats on the groom's side vanished from the layout. The new diagram showed a decorative barrel where the space should be. Lauren forwarded it with, "They said it looks nicer this way." I replied, "ADA seating on both sides per rider, not negotiable." Olivia, the manager, answered within minutes, reverting to approved layout. Cheryl texted, "It's our aesthetic," and I replied, "It's accessibility and safety." Tyler wrote, "Can we compromise?" I answered, "We already did when we picked a venue that works for everyone." The rehearsal email arrived without my name on the contact line. It listed Cheryl's cell for vendors and deliveries. I forwarded it to Olivia and Miguel with, "Use my number as contracted." Miguel replied, "Seen. I'll ignore others for direction." Olivia wrote, "Confirmed. Day of authority remains with you." Ryan sent a private message. "They think you're trying to run the wedding." "I'm trying to keep promises," I wrote back, "so no one gets hurt or humiliated." He said, "I get it," and used a shrug emoji that felt honest. I updated the binder tabs and added a simple checklist. If they pushed harder, I wanted to be boring and correct. On the porch that evening, Tyler finally admitted the pressure. "She wants a country club moment," he said, eyes on his shoes. "This isn't that," I said, "and that's okay." He asked if I could let little things slide. "I have," I said, but not the core stuff. He nodded and said he'd handle his family. I said I would keep to the paperwork and the plan. Neither of us pretended that would be easy, but the line was clear. The cuts were adding up, and I could see the day they'd try to pull the whole thread. The barn looked calm under the late sun, but I could already feel tension humming beneath the chatter. Olivia's team was setting up chairs, the white folding kind that made even normal arguments sound louder when they scraped. Lauren stood near the arch, holding her bouquet test piece, while Cheryl hovered beside her like a stage director. "It's not symmetrical," Cheryl said, and pointed at one flower that leaned a little to the left. Lauren smiled tight and said, "It's fine, Mom." Tyler adjusted his cufflinks and looked at me like I was supposed to fix everything. I stayed near the binder and checked the vendor times again. Calm beats conflict, every time. Mom arrived a few minutes later, taking her time down the ramp with her cane. Ryan met her halfway, gentle as ever, while Cheryl frowned at the pace. "Maybe we'll seat her in the back," she said, pretending it was about visibility. Lauren froze, her smile turning into a mask. "She sits in front," I said, simple and quiet. "Left aisle, first row, per plan." Cheryl laughed softly. "It's not your day, Daniel." The phrase landed with a sting that echoed through the rafters. I looked at Lauren, waiting to see if she'd step in. She didn't. She looked at the floor instead. Miguel arrived, slinging his camera over one shoulder. "Where do you want test shots?" he asked. Cheryl waved him toward her side. "Over here," she said. "The light's better." He looked at me, waiting for confirmation. I said, "Use the arch and aisle as planned." He nodded and moved. Cheryl sighed, dramatic. "You know, we're just trying to make this beautiful." I said, "That's why we follow the plan we all agreed to." Ryan whispered something to Tyler, who said nothing back. The rehearsal script ran smoother than the people reading it. When Lauren's cue came, she hesitated, then glanced at her mom instead of me. After the walkthrough, Olivia pulled me aside. "You're the contracting party," she said softly. "So if this keeps escalating, let me know early tomorrow." I thanked her and said, "I'll keep things calm." She nodded, not quite convinced. Ryan stayed behind and helped stack chairs. "They're going to push hard tomorrow," he said, not looking up. "I know," I said, "and I'll stay polite." He grinned a little. "You're scary when you're polite." I smiled back because he wasn't wrong. By the time we locked the barn, the sun was gone, and so was the thin layer of patience I'd been holding. That night, Mom called from her hotel room. "You did right," she said, voice steady but tired. "You kept your tone." I told her about the missing seating chart and the "not your day" comment. She sighed and said, "People show their manners under pressure." I said, "Contracts show theirs too." She laughed softly, the kind that still sounded proud. I opened the binder again and checked every clause like prayer beads. Guest conduct, non-disparagement, point of contact, all written, all initialed. I added one new sticky note. If provoked, pause, don't argue. That became my rule for the next day. The morning came bright and crisp, with too many cars already parked near the entrance. Cheryl's SUV blocked the ramp, and two of her cousins were unloading boxes. "You'll need to move that," I said, friendly as possible. One shrugged. "We'll be quick." I pointed to the sign that read "Accessible Path. Keep clear." "Venue policy," I said. "Move now or risk breach." The cousin looked annoyed but drove off without another word. Lauren came over with her veil pinned loosely and asked, "Can we not fight today?" "I'm not fighting," I said, "just enforcing." She nodded, but her eyes were already tired. Inside, Cheryl was rearranging the chairs again, moving the aisle markers I'd labeled the night before. "The photographer said this angle's better," she said. Miguel raised his camera and shook his head gently. "No, ma'am, we're good here," he said. "I follow the contracted plan." Cheryl muttered, "Of course," and stepped aside like it was an inconvenience. Olivia came over and gave me a quick nod, subtle and reassuring. I thanked her quietly and double-checked the timeline. Every minute was mapped. Every task had a name next to it. The system was built for chaos, but still the cracks were showing. When the rehearsal ended, I heard Cheryl whisper to one of her sisters, "He's treating this like a job." I didn't turn. She wasn't wrong either. Work makes emotion behave. I gathered the leftover programs and sealed them in the tote. Ryan came by and said, "You're too calm. It's eerie." I said, "Calm is the best defense." He chuckled. "Then tomorrow they won't know what hit them." "I'm not hitting anyone," I said. "I'm just letting paper speak." He grinned and said, "That's worse for them." I didn't argue. The night was too still for that. Tomorrow would do the talking. The morning after the rehearsal, I sat at my kitchen table with coffee and the binder open like a quiet weapon. Every tab had a purpose: blue for contracts, yellow for amendments, red for incident notes. I reviewed each page with the same calm I used for work audits. The binder wasn't a symbol of control, it was insurance against chaos. I read the first clause again. The contracting client retains authority over vendors, timeline adjustments, and service interruptions. One clean line, no interpretation needed. I'd signed it, Olivia had countersigned, and it carried real weight. Next came the conduct clause. Any guest behavior deemed disruptive, threatening, or discriminatory may result in a temporary suspension of services until the issue is resolved. I'd added that one myself after seeing a wedding spiral last year, when the bride's uncle harassed the caterer. Olivia had smiled when I suggested it. "You've done this before," she'd said. I hadn't, but project management is close enough. Paper doesn't get nervous or forget who said what. I added new notes from the rehearsal. Date, behavior, exact phrasing. It's not your day. It wasn't personal anymore. It was documentation. I flipped to the media rights clause Miguel had reviewed. All photographs and footage captured are licensed to the contracting client only. That one mattered more than I'd realized at first. If the Banks family thought they could run their own narrative later, they'd learn the photos weren't theirs to post. I highlighted the enforcement line. Unauthorized distribution may result in takedown or withholding of content. Fair, firm, and legal. I smiled once and moved on. I added a small sticky with my new checklist. Confirm Olivia briefed staff on point of contact clause. Verify ADA layout restored. Confirm vendor access passes. Record setup photos for compliance proof. Simple steps, nothing emotional. I texted Olivia, "Confirming your team has my number on day of contact sheet?" She replied, "Within 2 minutes. Yes, all vendors briefed, ready for tomorrow." That answer felt better than sleep. By late morning, I met Miguel at a diner near the barn to go over timing. He ordered black coffee and said, "I saw her trying to boss your sister yesterday. You good?" I nodded. "Good enough," I said. "You'll follow my shot list, same as before." He grinned. "I like when people read contracts. Makes life clean." I handed him a printed copy with sticky notes marking the copyright terms. "This saves both of us later," I said. "If anyone claims ownership, you'll have written proof." He looked impressed. "You're the calm kind of dangerous, aren't you?" I didn't deny it. That afternoon, I drove to the barn with the binder on the passenger seat. Olivia met me by the office door with her clipboard. "Everything set?" I asked. "Mostly," she said. "They tried to swap caterers again this morning, but I told them the contract was locked." "Appreciate that," I said. She smiled. "I've seen enough weddings to know who's paying attention." We walked through the floor plan again. Ada seating confirmed, photo zones marked, emergency routes clear. She pointed to a small side door and said, "If things go bad, step here. It's quiet and out of view." "Hopefully I won't need that," I said. "Hopefully," she replied, and closed the folder in her hands. Back home, I called Mom to check in. "Everything ready?" she asked. "As much as it can be," I said. "You just focus on being comfortable tomorrow." "Don't let them push you," she said softly. "You already gave enough." I promised I'd stay steady. She chuckled. "That's what scares them." Before bed, I packed the binder, my insurance forms, and a flash drive with all the contracts scanned in order. I placed them in a slim briefcase that used to hold my old project proposals. The last thing I did was add one more page. If insulted, pause. If breached, enforce. No drama, no noise, just a plan. Tomorrow wasn't supposed to be my day, but the ink said otherwise, and ink doesn't lie. I reached the barn before 8, sky pale and cool over the fields. Olivia met me at the ramp, checked her watch, and nodded once. "We run on your timeline," she said, crisp and neutral, like policy. I thanked her and walked the path to the arch, counting steps automatically. 2 of Tyler's cousins were already shifting chairs like they owned blueprints. "Appreciate the help," I said, "but layout stays per plan, per contract." One shrugged, asked who died, and made me boss of weddings. "Nobody died," I said, "but my signature pays for the living parts." He laughed small, then stopped when Olivia appeared beside me. "Please return the chairs," she said, "or we'll halt access to the lawn." They put the chairs back without arguing again. Inside the prep room, Lauren's dress hung like quiet, snow against the door. She hugged me, fast and tight, and asked if everything looked okay. "We're good," I said, as long as people follow the plan. She exhaled and pressed her hands flat on her stomach, steadying herself. Tyler stepped in and asked if his mother could seat a few extra relatives. We built a buffer, I said, but Ada Rose stay open as marked. He tried a smile and said he'd keep things peaceful on his side. Peace is welcome, I said, but compliance is required. He nodded, then glanced toward the hall like it might solve something. I noted the time on my phone because memory cheats under pressure. Miguel arrived with his hard case and a calm grin that helped. Where do you want pre-ceremony? He asked, already checking light near the windows. Aisle tests and family formals by the arch, I said. No side instructions. He tapped his list, then pointed to the binder peeking from my briefcase. You look like a courtroom on legs, he joked, keeping his voice low. I said, just trying to protect the soft parts with clear rules. Cheryl swept in on that line, perfume sharp, eyes already measuring everyone. We'll start photos with the Banks ladies, she announced chin high. Miguel looked at me, and I shook my head once. Shot order stays as scheduled, I said. Cheryl smiled without warmth and said, It's not your day, I answered. It is my contract, and let the words settle like weight. I found Ryan near the bar, checking water pitchers like he worked there. I'll run interference, he said quietly, eyes tracking Cheryl's orbit. I handed him a small card listing 3 non-negotiables in plain English. Accessibility, conduct, authority, he read, then tucked it in his pocket. Short enough to remember when things get loud, I said, keeping it light. He told me Cheryl was lining up an aunt for surprise remarks. Pre-approved speeches only, I said. Send it to me if there's text. He nodded and said he'd stall until paper appeared. Olivia radioed that the shuttle driver needed placement confirmation. Front loop only, I said. Keep the ramp clear at all times. I took a photo of the sign and the open path, a simple record that asked for nothing. By 9:30, the florist needed space for the arch spray and aisle markers. Cheryl tried to veto the coral ribbon like it was a federal offense. Family palette is muted, she said, tone soft and cutting. Bride's palette is coral, I answered, pointing at the order sheet. She sighed, waved a hand, and told a cousin to fix it later. Miguel caught my eye and whispered, Want a timestamp of original setup? Yes, I said. Full frame, wide, then detail. He clicked, steady and patient, building our quiet proof with every shot. Tyler asked if we could bring the start time forward, just a little. Guests and staff are timed, I said, moving it. Risks service overlap and spills. He swallowed that truth and looked relieved someone else held the line. Olivia briefed her team again, short and firm, and placed wristbands for vendor access. I handed Miguel the authorized directions lanyard and kept another for myself. Cheryl reached for one like it was a party favor, face perfectly calm. These aren't decorative, I said. They indicate lawful instructions. She raised both eyebrows and murmured, Lawful? At a wedding? It's still a business event, I said, with safety and liability attached. Ryan coughed into his fist, hiding a grin that could have started a fight. The DJ arrived with a thumb drive labeled Final, which always means it isn't. I checked the list and found 3 unapproved open mic slots tucked between songs. These are cut, I said. We keep speeches tight, then dance. He nodded quickly, grateful for clarity over chaos. By 10, guests began drifting onto the lawn, early and curious and loud. A cousin parked a stroller across the ramp without thinking about wheels and weight. I moved it gently and said, Please, keep this path clear for accessibility. The cousin apologized, flustered, and rolled it to the far wall. Cheryl reappeared with her sisters, pointing at rows like generals before a parade. We'll shift the front 2 for better photographs, she announced. No, I said. Those are reserved for elders and mobility needs. She pursed her lips and said, You like rules more than people, Daniel. Rules protect people, I answered, especially when nerves run wild. She muttered something about control. I let it float away from the microphones. Lauren stepped out for first look photos, nerves settling into something stronger. Miguel guided her with the kind of quiet that doesn't bruise. Tyler turned, saw her, and the noise around us softened by itself. For one clean minute, the day felt like it might behave. Then a shout rose from the bar, sharp enough to slice the moment. A Banks uncle argued with Olivia's staff about drink limits before ceremony. Service opens after vows, the bartender said, steady and professional. The uncle snapped, Not your rules today. I walked over, slow and even, binder still closed at my side. It is our rule, I said, and breaking it pauses the event. He stared, then backed off, heat draining from his face in a rush. I stepped aside and wrote a short note on my incident sheet. Time, place, words used, staff present, action taken. No color, no opinion, only facts that behave when read later. Ryan joined me and asked if we were already at red lines. Yellow, I said, but the line's bright and painted twice. He nodded, scanned the lawn, and positioned himself where trouble usually starts. Cheryl watched from the shade, expression cool, strategy still forming. I felt the strange calm that comes right before weather changes. The plan was holding, but tension was riding every aisle like wind. We were minutes from the vows, and the day had stopped pretending to be polite. The aisle music started soft, and guests rose in that instinctive wave that happens at every wedding when the doors crack open. Olivia signaled the processional, then froze when Cheryl's sisters swung the front chairs aside and parked themselves like bouncers. Mom stood near the ramp, waiting for Ryan, but Cheryl stepped in and said, "Back rows are better for sightlines." Mom's jaw trembled, and she looked at me like this was a test I'd already studied for. "Front row, left aisle," I said, steady and plain, "per accessibility rider and seating chart." Cheryl gave the bright smile of someone certain she can win by tone alone. "Not your day, Daniel," she said, and her sisters nodded like a jury. I looked at Olivia and said, "Pause processional." The music cut mid-bar, and the room changed temperature in one clean second. Murmurs rose as if the barn itself could talk, and Tyler's face turned the color of cold milk. "What are you doing?" he hissed, trying to smile for the guests while not actually smiling. I opened the binder and placed one finger on the red tab. No drama, just motion. "Section 5, I said, low enough for staff but loud enough to be heard. "Guest conduct and accessibility. Services suspend during a breach until corrected." Cheryl barked a laugh like it was a funny legal skit, then flicked her eyes at the DJ. "Play," she told him, and he looked past her to me. "Hold," I said, and he held because his contract sat under my signature. Miguel lifted his camera, not to shoot, but to record the layout as it stood. Ryan guided Mom to the front row and stood behind her like a quiet wall. Cheryl stepped forward again, and I saw the moment become a choice. Fix it fast, or let it become the whole story. "Resolve what?" Cheryl asked, chin high, voice sugar. "We're just making it nicer for photos." Olivia stood beside me, clipboard steady, staff ready, policy in her posture. "The ramp must remain clear and the front row ADA seats remain as reserved," she said. "Failure to comply triggers a venue hold and may require removal." Tyler swallowed, then turned to his mother with a plea that came out as breath. "Mom, please," he said. "Let's sit Grandma Mercer up front and move on." Cheryl whispered, "You're being managed by him," and jabbed a finger toward me like it could move policy. I raised the binder an inch, enough to make a point without swinging it like a flag. "Options," I said, voice level. 1. Restore ADA seats, apologize to staff for obstruction, and we proceed in 3 minutes. 2. We stay paused, incur overtime, and I file a breach notice for the record. The room hushed in pieces as people realized they were watching a rule get tested. Ryan bent toward Cheryl and spoke soft enough to pass under the noise. "He's not bluffing, and neither is the venue," he said. Miguel panned once, capturing the path, the seats, the faces turned like sunflowers toward conflict. Cheryl's sisters stepped back first, small inches that felt like miles. Then Cheryl followed with a sigh that sounded expensive. "Fine," she said, and waved her hand in a tiny surrender that tried to look generous. She faced Olivia and said, "We're sorry for the confusion," each word chosen like it hurt to carry. Olivia nodded, professional and unruffled, and pointed to the chairs. Staff reset them in less than a minute. Quick hands, quiet feet, everything returning to the plan. I looked at Mom and said, "Ready?" She nodded, eyes bright and clear, and touched my wrist as she sat like a queen in the seat meant for her. The DJ looked at me again, and I gave the small nod that restarts a heart. Music rose, aisle doors opened, guests stood without the earlier rustle of doubt. Tyler wiped his eyes like dust had blown in and took his place with a straight spine. Lauren stepped out, and even Cheryl had to admit the light was perfect from where Mom sat. Miguel caught the moment with the speed of someone who respects tension and knows how to save joy. I closed the binder without a sound and slid it under my arm like a promise kept. The stall had lasted 11 minutes, long enough to teach respect, short enough to keep the day intact. We moved forward, because the rules protected the people, which is exactly what rules are for when used right. After the vows, the air felt lighter, like the barn exhaled with us. Miguel moved fast but soft, guiding people into place without poking pride. I opened the shot list and kept my finger on the lines we had promised Lauren. Immediate family first, then grandparents, then wedding party, I said, clear and calm. Cheryl tried to slide her sisters in ahead of Mom, smiling like it was harmless. We'll get your group right after the scheduled set, I said, no judgment in my tone. She laughed and said, your lists make everything so rigid. They make it fair, I answered, and gestured to the marked spot. Miguel nodded and captured frames that looked like peace on purpose. Tyler stayed beside Lauren, hands steady, eyes on me like I was the metronome. When we shifted to the extended family rows, a man with a mirrorless camera stepped forward. I'm the other photographer, he said, raising the lens like a badge. Who hired you? I asked, already knowing the answer by the quiet in his eyes. Banks family, he said, and waited for me to flinch. I didn't. Please stop directing, I said, and move to guest areas only. Cheryl protested, calling it extra coverage, like that solved the conflict. Miguel kept shooting while I opened the binder to the media clause. The contracting client controls image rights and direction, I read, steady as a clock. Olivia joined us, saw the wording, and told the second shooter to stand down. He backed off, grumbling, and shot wide candids from the aisle like a tourist. We finished the planned combinations without a single missing elder, which mattered most. Lauren leaned toward me and whispered thanks without moving her mouth much. Tyler nodded, relief breaking across his face like sunlight through a window. Private moment next, Miguel said, and walked them toward a tree line with gold light. Cheryl tried to follow, but Olivia stepped between with a practiced smile. Couple only for 10 minutes, Olivia said, voice low, eyes kind but fixed. Ryan kept the rest of the guests near the lawn games with a joke about horseshoes and dress shoes. I stood back, but I listened for raised voices and watched for hands moving chairs again. The place looked like a plan that finally respected itself, which is the only plan that works. Cheryl returned with a new tactic. We'll want the raw files for family archives, she said. We don't release raw files, Miguel replied, keeping the lens capped during the break. Licenses to Daniel as contracting client, I added, tapping the clause again. Finals delivered in 2 weeks, watermarked previews in 48 hours. She frowned like I'd spoken a foreign language. Why watermarks? She asked, the word rolling slow like she'd never seen one. Normal posture, I said. Proofs prevent unauthorized posting or edits. She tilted her head, measuring outcomes, not words, and then smiled a little too late. We'll see, she said, which always means we won't if the paper holds. Miguel chuckled softly and said, I love a clean contract almost as much as good light. During cocktail hour, I set a small table near the office for file custody. Miguel transferred a selection of shots to my labeled drive, then kept the card on his person. Redundancy saves reputations, he said, sealing the case. I signed his intake sheet like we'd rehearsed this at a studio. Cheryl hovered again and asked if she could borrow the drive for a family slideshow. No, I said, warm but firm. Delivery follows the invoice and the rights. She said, it's not your day, but she said it softer now, more habit than weapon. It is my responsibility, I said, and responsibility is what keeps this day safe. Tyler walked up and put a hand on my shoulder without saying anything. Some things don't need words. They need weight and a witness. The best man speech hit exactly the way we planned it. Short, honest, and clean. No open mic slipped in. No aunt testing the limit. No cousin with a one more thing. Miguel shot the toast from a low angle, keeping the barn beams like a frame. Cheryl walked to the DJ during applause, but he lifted a finger toward me. I held up 2 fingers for 2 more minutes of planned music before the cake. She sighed and returned to her table, where her sisters watched me like I'd parked a police car outside. Mom laughed with Lauren's college friends and didn't need to stand for anything. The ADA seats stayed free of coats, purses, and strollers, like a miracle built by tape and signs. Near sunset, Cheryl tried again with a sweeter line. You're very thorough, she said, which was as close to a compliment as she could manage. Thorough is how we keep memories clean, I said, and offered her the schedule copy. She took it, read the bold line about photo direction, and set it down like a hot plate. Will we get the gallery link too? She asked, eyes careful. I'll share selected images after delivery, I said, with Lauren's approval. She nodded and said nothing, which was safer than another, "Not your day." Ryan drifted by and whispered, "You're diffusing bombs with paperwork." "That's the job," I said. "The job is love, but love needs a safety plan." When the dance floor opened, Miguel and his second moved like chess pieces. He covered the wide shots. She handled portraits by the string lights. I checked the list and confirmed that every promised moment had a home. "Last call for family portraits," Miguel said, and people came without the usual drag. Cheryl joined one frame with a surprised smile that looked real for once. "Beautiful," Miguel said, and he meant it, which helps people behave. I stood a few steps back and let myself feel proud without showing it on my face. We closed with sparkler photos, supervised, buckets of sand placed like guardrails. It looked like magic to the guests. It looked like compliance to me, and both were true. Back at the office desk, I signed the final custody note. Miguel handed me 2 encrypted backups and a printed proof sheet. "Watermarked gallery goes to you by Monday," he said, "then invoicing and delivery per contract." "Send the invoice tonight," I said, "and I'll route payment and release." Cheryl hovered in the doorway, undecided between another fight and a truce. I turned to her and said, "You'll get beautiful photos through the proper path." She looked at Lauren across the room, then at Mom, then at me. "Fine," she said, and the word didn't bend this time. I closed the binder and felt the room finally match the plan in my hands. Sunday morning, the barn sat quiet again, only the sound of staff sweeping glitter off the deck. Olivia met me by the office door, clipboard already balanced in her hands. "Smoothest recovery I've seen after a stall," she said. "You held your ground." I smiled once and said, "Paper helped." We reviewed post-event checklists, trash cleared, vendor gear removed, security deposits pending. She flipped to the service log and said, "I noted your breach pause is justified, so there's no penalty." I thanked her, then handed her an envelope with Miguel's invoice, the florist's receipt, and the signed overtime sheet. "Keep copies in the archive," I said. "It'll make sense by noon." By the time I reached home, emails had already arrived, one from Miguel with the watermarked gallery link, another from Olivia confirming balance closure, and one unread message from Cheryl. The subject line read, "Concerns about billing." I opened it, sipped coffee, and read every word twice. She called the overtime charge ridiculous, said guests shouldn't pay for feelings, and copied Tyler as if looping him in gave weight to her complaint. I drafted my reply like a ledger. Per Section 4, delay caused by breach of conduct clause. Overtime triggered automatically after 10 minutes. Invoice reflects contracted terms. I ended it with, "Please review page 6 of the signed agreement for confirmation." No emotion, just structure. An hour later, my phone buzzed. Tyler. "Mom's freaking out," he said. "She says you're fining her for seating." "The clause applies to the client," I said, "and I am the client. The fee covers the stall, staff time, and recoordination." Silence stretched long enough for both of us to breathe through it. "You're not wrong," he said quietly. "She just can't lose face." "She already paid for that privilege," I said. He exhaled, said thanks, and promised to talk her down. I forwarded the full invoice set to my archive folder and placed printed copies in the binder. Paper keeps its posture long after people slump. By afternoon, Olivia called to confirm the transaction. "Funds cleared," she said. "Deposit refund processed to your card minus overtime." I asked if there had been any fallout at her end. "They called," she said, "but we walked them through the contract." She hung up mid-sentence. I thanked her again and said, "Send my regards to your crew for keeping calm." "We'll hang your color-coded timeline in the back office," she said, laughing. "It's basically art now." I smiled and said, "Call it a warning exhibit." 2 days later, Cheryl's attorney emailed a request for reconsideration. Polite but brittle. He cited emotional distress and ambiguous authority. I forwarded it to Colleen Hart, my own attorney, who answered in 10 minutes flat. "They don't have a claim," she said. "The signature page lists you as contracting party. Their best move is to drop it." I said, "They won't drop it easily." "Then we'll invoice for correspondence," she said, practical and calm. Within 24 hours, Cheryl's lawyer withdrew with a short note. "Our client wishes to resolve this privately." Translation: they'd read the paperwork. Lauren came by that evening with cupcakes and an apology. "She shouldn't have said those things," she whispered. "She knows it now." "Knowing and changing aren't the same," I said. She nodded and slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a handwritten note from Cheryl. Thank you for ensuring the day stayed and organized. I regret my tone. It wasn't affection, but it was recognition. I placed the note in the binder between guest conduct and payment reconciliation. Every story deserves its record, even the ones about courtesy learned late. Mom called after dinner. So, the Banks family finally folded? She asked. Folded and filed, I said. She laughed, the warm kind that ends a long month. You never raised your voice once, she said. I didn't have to, I told her. The contract spoke louder. She paused. That's the difference between control and respect, isn't it? Exactly, I said. One is noise, the other is structure. The final confirmation arrived Friday. All balances settled, releases signed, no outstanding disputes. Miguel's gallery link went live with clean, vivid color. No filters, no fake edits, just moments frozen as they actually happened. I sent Lauren a copy, told her, "You can post with credit. Watermark stays." She texted back, "They're perfect." Tyler added, "Thank you for saving our day." I didn't reply right away. I looked at the photo of Mom smiling under the arch and the coral ribbons glowing in sunset light. That was the proof of purpose, order holding love steady, even when love stumbles. I closed the binder for the last time and labeled it Mercer Banks Wedding Completed. It sat on my shelf beside work projects, no different from any other system finished right. Cheryl might still tell people it wasn't my day, but every vendor, every clause, every frame said otherwise. In ink, it was. And ink, unlike opinion, doesn't fade. Colleen met me in a small conference room that smelled like paper and coffee. She opened her pad and said, "Walk me through only the facts." I gave times, exact lines, and who stood close enough to hear. She nodded and said, "Good. Now we match those to the clauses." Olivia joined by phone and confirmed the pause, the warning, and the correction. "We followed policy without drama," Olivia said, voice steady through the speaker. Miguel added notes on direction control and the second shooter's limits. "I never changed course without Daniel's approval," he said, clear and calm. Colleen wrote fast, then looked up and smiled. "This reads like a manual for adults who forgot manners." I said, "I prefer clean systems over loud scenes." She replied, "Clean systems win, especially in small-town courts." We kept the legal notes brief and boring on purpose. Colleen explained how small claims works, then translated the language. If they file, we respond, attach contracts, request dismissal, she said. I asked about fees and whether it might snowball into drama again. "Unlikely," she said. "They want face back, not a courtroom." Olivia emailed staff statements with dates and initials, no fluff, only sequence. Miguel uploaded timestamped photos showing the ramp, the seats, and the reset. "Evidence is a story that doesn't need adjectives," Colleen said. I asked if we should send a warning letter in advance. She shook her head. "Silence keeps options open and lowers heat." I exhaled, feeling the long week finally leave my shoulders. Tyler texted to meet at a diner near the highway that evening. He arrived early, eyes heavy, suit jacket still in the car. "She called every relative," he said, stirring coffee like it needed discipline. "Says you used a wedding to flex power." I said, "I use contracts to stop humiliation and keep safety." He nodded, then stared at the napkin dispenser. "I know," he said. "I should have backed you sooner." I kept my tone soft and even. Backing Lauren would have been enough. He blew out a breath and finally looked me in the eye. "I'm sorry," he said, and the words sounded earned. "Tell her to stop contacting vendors," I added. "Any questions, come to me." He said he would, and for the first time I believed him. The fallout reached the family group chat by dawn the next day. Cheryl posted a long message about being sidelined and cold professionalism. Lauren replied, "Mom, Daniel protected the plan we agreed to." Silence landed like a door closing in a hallway. Ryan texted me privately, "I'll back whatever you write." I wrote nothing. Silence is a tool when words get twisted. Mom called and said, "Let them sit with the truth." I thanked her and asked about her knee after all that standing. "Better than pride," she said, and laughed in the way that fixes a room. Colleen forwarded a last email from Cheryl's lawyer asking for a meeting. "They want a settlement chat," Colleen said. "No threats, just tone." We met in her office with the window facing a small parking lot. The lawyer opened with pleasantries and then asked for goodwill consideration. Colleen smiled kindly. "Goodwill was extended through compliance," she said. "No refund, no apology demanded, no smear campaign." He asked for the overtime to be cut in half to heal Feelings. Colleen tapped the contract. Feelings paused the event. Feelings paid for the staff. He finally nodded, closed his folder, and said, "Then we'll consider the matter closed." Translation: they saw the record and ran out of angles. Apologies came in private, not on the group chat. Ryan sent, "You kept the day safe and fair." Olivia texted, "Best managed stall I've seen." Miguel attached a photo of Mom under the arch, golden and still. The message from Cheryl took 2 days and used careful words. "I regret my phrase," she wrote. "I won't say it again." I replied, "Thank you. Future decisions follow written approvals." She sent a dot, then another, then nothing, which was better than noise. Tyler and Lauren asked us to dinner at their apartment the next week. We ate takeout on the floor because the couch delivery ran late. "We're setting boundaries," Lauren said, firm and bright. "You helped us learn how." Holiday plans shifted without an announcement. Thanksgiving moved to our side of town with chairs already spaced for knees and feet. No one touched the ramp. No one joked about the back rows. Tyler arrived early and asked where to set pies and keys. Cheryl came late, eyes softer, voice quiet like a church lobby. She hugged Mom, small and careful, and asked where she'd like to sit. I watched the scene settle like a table that finally stopped wobbling. The contract became a story in our family, not a weapon, just a reminder. Rules didn't fix everything, but they gave good people a path when nerves failed. Respect felt like warmth in the room, simple and earned, which is how I like endings to be. A week later, Lauren and Tyler came over with a simple idea. They wanted new terms for holidays, budgets, and decision-making. Nothing lofty, just clear expectations written in normal words. We sat at my dining table with coffee and a yellow pad. "No surprises," Lauren said, smiling like she meant rest more than rules. Tyler added, "We need small fences so everyone can breathe." I drew boxes for money, roles, and respect, then underlined each twice. The plan was boring by design, the way bridges are boring until storms arrive. Boring keeps families standing when feelings want center stage. We started with money because money sneaks under every door. I explained discretionary support in plain English, case-by-case help with receipts. Tyler nodded and said, "No IOU drama, just yes or no." We set a rule. Any shared cost gets a written estimate first. If emotions run hot, we press pause for 1 day. Lauren leaned back and said the pause helped more than therapy. She wasn't wrong. Time cools sparks better than apologies typed fast. I added one more line. No reimbursements without pre-approval, and a budget cap. Everyone signed the page, even though it was only ink and good intentions. Next came roles, which felt like relabeling furniture so people stopped bumping shins. "Hosts decide layout," I said, "and accessibility is non-negotiable." Tyler repeated it, slower, like he wanted the words to stick. We listed primary contacts for vendors, one name only per task. No secret committees, no cousins with great contacts. Lauren laughed at that and then apologized for laughing. I told her laughter helps plans breathe when nerves squeeze. Ryan texted that he loved the idea and would volunteer as backup. Backup is good. Backup doesn't need the microphone to matter. We wrote it down because paper remembers what rooms forget. Respect sat last on the pad, heavier than the other boxes. We wrote simple sentences a child could read without squinting. No public insults, no shaming, no sabotaging logistics to improve aesthetics. If someone slips, the host calls a quick timeout. Apology comes first, discussion comes later. Mom called during this part and said, "Add chairs for knees and grace." I wrote that too, even though grace resists lists. "These are our new terms," Lauren said, tapping the page, "clear enough to follow when feelings flare." We took a photo and labeled it like a receipt for peace. Block B. I redirected the leftover budget without ceremony or posts. The money I had saved for extra decor went to Mom's ramp upgrade. The contractor quoted 3 days and a fair price in writing. Tyler offered to help with cleanup and actually showed up early. Lauren brought lunch and a chair for Mom to watch without strain. "This is what support looks like," Mom said with the warm laugh again. We added grab bars, better lighting, and a wider landing. Small things, but small things change how rooms treat bodies. The ramp felt like respect you could walk on. When the work finished, we drove to the barn at sunset. Olivia waved from the office and met us by the front steps. "Thought you might want to say goodbye properly," she said, holding a folder. Inside were copies of the final service log and a thank you note. We stood near the arch, now bare, and listened to wind through beams. Lauren squeezed my arm and said, "You built calm when I couldn't." Tyler said, "You built boundaries, and the day fit inside them." I told them both the same truth. I just followed the map we drew. Olivia smiled and said, "Maps matter when tempers pretend to lead." Colleen called later to close the file without extra charges. "No suits, no hearings, nothing pending," she said. "That's how grown-ups land the plane." I told her the new family terms were already working. She said contracts at home were just promises with pens. "Keep them short, then keep them," she added, and signed off. I archived our documents next to old project binders. The wedding file became another lesson in measured courage. Not loud, not flashy, just steady work with quiet tools. Quiet tools save more days than speeches ever will. Weeks passed, and language shifted without fanfare. Cheryl stopped saying, "Not your day," and started asking, "What's the plan?" She sent recipes before holidays instead of directives after arrival. She carried plates to the sink and asked where Mom wanted to sit. It wasn't sudden grace, it was learned behavior supported by rules. Lauren and Tyler kept practicing small, boring kindnesses. I kept the binder closed but nearby, as a reminder, not a threat. Respect settled into our rooms like soft light by late afternoon. The story didn't end with triumph, it ended with working terms. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to like the video and tell me what you think in the comments. And of course, subscribe for more stories like this one.